everyone. Hi. Mr. Neil Egan, Assistant Secretary, Irish Department of Social Protection. Mr. Niels Lehman, International Business Advisor of UWB, the Employment Insurance Office at Netherlands. And then we have also Professor Dr. Alexander Savanov, Vice President of ESA Employment Technical Commission. Mr. Umar Jai, Head of Department at SOXO. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone tuning in. My name is Farkadi Mohamad, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. And today's discussion is actually on employment insurance, an essential social safety net during the turbulent times. All right. I'll be going through some questions, and then maybe we could get Mr. Niall to start, and then we'll go over eastwards to Mr. Neil, and then Chai. All right. The COVID pandemic has actually hit the economy very badly. Many of us are still struggling to overcome it. There's so many different variants. All right. And it has led to movement restrictions as well, even changing the nature of how we work. In your respective economies, maybe if you could briefly share how the COVID-19 has impacted the labor market, and then maybe as well share details of which industry is affected, maybe even the distributional impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which kind of workers that are affected. So with that, maybe we could start with Mr. Niall Egan.
Thank you. Obviously, I think, the one thing we all have in common, I'd imagine we're all going to say something very similar in response to this question. From an Irish perspective, the impact has been huge. It's been a challenge, unprecedented challenge for my department, the Department of Social Protection. The scale of it, for instance, we had to introduce a brand new, three new payments essentially in the first few weeks of the pandemic. We first went into lockdown. It was announced on the 13th of March. We have our National Day on the 17th of March. The first we sort of realized how serious it was when the national parades were all cancelled on about on the 10th of March. And international rugby matches were also cancelled shortly after. On the 13th, the Taoiseach, our Prime Minister, he was actually meeting the US President at the time, and he made an announcement from Washington, D.C. that the country was going to be going into lockdown with effect the next day, starting with schools on the Friday, childcare. What happened then was the whole country went mad at the weekend in pubs, restaurants, everything, and the government extended an entire national lockdown essentially on all industries, including construction, essentially on the Monday after. What we faced then on that Monday was, over the weekend, we developed a new payment called the Pandemic Unemployment Payment. And I might just share a screen very quickly with you all. This pandemic unemployment, the problem we would have had is our existing unemployment schemes are long. I don't know, can you see that? Yep. Our existing unemployment schemes are, we have a means tested scheme and a social insurance scheme. We knew, given the scale of people who were essentially made unemployed overnight, that we would not be in a position to process those payments. It would take us weeks, if not months, to get them into payment. So we introduced this payment here called the Pandemic Unemployment Payment. At its peak, we had just under 600,000 people in receipt of it, but a total of 863,000, as you see there. It's actually gone up a bit since the end of May, have received a payment. This payment is more generous and it's got less eligibility than our job seekers payment. Essentially, in order to qualify, you need one social insurance contribution and have had lost employment. That allowed us to be able to process about 4 months worth of unemployment claims in a week, in terms of, that was the equivalent. Otherwise, as I said, it would have taken us weeks and months to get payments into people. And like all our institutions, we very quickly realized that when we went into a lockdown, it was moving the pressure, it was taking the pressure away from our health system and putting it very much on the labour market and the Department of Social Protection. So we had to respond. We also introduced two, at the time it was one new scheme, and we evolved it. It was called the Temporary Wage Subsidy Scheme. This scheme, it's the middle one there, was designed to prevent employees losing their job by providing subsidies, state subsidies, furlong schemes to employers. A lot of countries have introduced similar schemes. We replaced that actually in July 2020 with a slightly different scheme, but the same tenant behind it, called the Employment Wage Subsidy Scheme. And you can see about 1.3 million people receive total supports between those three schemes. That's 1.3 million unique people receive supports, whether they be in receipt of the unemployment payment or their subsidy to their employer. What I would say is that 1.3 million. Yep.
Yeah, sorry about sorry, forgive for my ignorance, but what's the population like? The working population, at least.
Yeah. So I was just about to get there. The 1.3 million represents about 55% of our working population, right? So we've about 2.4 million in the labor force. At the time, you know, the first lockdown, we would have had about 2.2 million people in employment. So this was, we were coming from a very relatively low unemployment base, just under 5%. And it was, as I said, it was the department, we were focused on anti-poverty measures, social inclusion measures, and then overnight was dealing with a massive surge in unemployment and supporting people. One of the questions you asked was which sectors, and because of the nature of our lockdown, anything indoor essentially stopped. So accommodation, food, our hospitality sector essentially has been shut. Wholesale and retail, so shops, bar essential food services, supermarkets, hairdressing, barbers, things like that. Most of my colleagues had very long hair for most of last year. And obviously then there was also an impact on the healthcare. We also introduced a special illness benefit scheme, again, more generous, designed specifically to mitigate against people who might have symptoms of COVID, having to go to work from an economic necessity perspective. Very high rate of payment, the equivalent of the pandemic unemployment payment, higher. It was set at basically the average industrial wage of people in the accommodation and food service sector, about 350 euros per week. So that's a very quick overview. Happy to take any questions, but that's essentially been our high level experience of the pandemic.
Mr. Now. All right, without wasting time, I think we can go next to Mr. Neil, right? Maybe you could share your perspective from your economy as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Fakani. And first of all, thank you for having me. It's a big honor to be part of this Congress, and congratulations on the 50 years anniversary of SOCSO.
All right, yeah.
So I hope you also have a good celebration in this pandemic. To come back to your questions, well, it's really similar to what Niall just said. But in the beginning of 2020, when we saw the first waves of infections, we made two predictions, and our predictions were that the number of people on unemployment benefits would increase significantly, and that the numbers of vacancies would decrease to record low numbers. And our second prediction was that it would speed up long-term labor market trends, such as the shift to a more technological driven and a green economy. And there would be an increased need for labor in the healthcare sector, and that it would be our task to also facilitate transitions between sectors in decline and with an increased demand for labor. Just as many other countries, we have focused on keeping our colleagues safe and healthy, and we've been designing and implementing emergency measures, well, not over the weekend, but within a few weeks. And these projects, they normally take several years, and now within several weeks, it was all decided and implemented. Now that we are 18 months later, we can say safely that we were wrong in our first prediction. Unemployment rates only increased in the first few months. And I do have a slide I can share with you. Let me see. There we go. You should be able to see our unemployment rates now. I started on the left in January 2019. It was a little bit above 3.5%. And you can see here in March 2020, it was quite low actually. It went to 2.9%. And we've seen an increase of 50%, but still for many countries, you would say an unemployment rate of 4.5, 4.6% is not a very high percentage. And it went down to, well, it says this is the number of July, a little bit above 3%. So it went down quickly again. And we have seen that over in 2020, the people who lost their jobs due to COVID, a high percentage of them, really 61% of them found a new job within 6 months. So that was quite quickly as well. And if we look at the number of vacancies, yes, it went down in the beginning, but now we are at record numbers of vacancies again. And actually, at this moment, we have more vacancies than unemployed people in the Netherlands. So I will stop sharing. There we go. Here we are back again, or at least we should. On our second prediction that we would need to facilitate transitions, it's yet to be seen whether this will become the truth. We have designed and implemented a measure to support these successful transitions together with social partners and municipalities, and we try to prevent unemployment and to motivate people to make a switch to a new sector with better perspectives. And we do that in our so-called regional transition teams. However, at the moment, there's not so much request from the job seeker side, especially due to the limited number of people actually losing their jobs. And we also feel that by implementing our wage subsidy scheme, it seems like the labor market is on a pause and everybody is waiting for the labor market to start up again. And maybe then there will be a big need for transitions, but that is yet to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neil. It's nice to see some good news. Actually, the recovery signs are there. I'm not too sure if that's there for Malaysia though. So maybe my friend, my colleague, Encik Umar Jai, you could take the floor and probably contextualize our friends from abroad on the issues and challenges in Malaysia. Over to you.
Thank you, Fa. I actually echo the colleagues from Mr. Neil and Niels, which you have given us the explanation. It is actually quite, for us, Malaysia, it is an unprecedented kind of situation that we have gone through. I think it is globally facing the same thing also, as you have shared your views with regards to the crisis. And for us, it is quite special because we have just established the employment insurance system in year 2018. So we are considered quite new, and it is a challenge for us being a new agency in supporting workers who have lost their job. So it is quite challenging for us during last year actually. We started out by monitoring the cases reported as early as January. We saw some increase in the cases, and soon after, when it touches the month of March, we are able to notice that a much more severe, or shall I say, increase in the numbers. And by March, we saw a much more increase in the number of loss of employment cases. And starting from there, we have already in the pipeline to promote active labor market programs. As we heard, wage subsidies, employment retention programs. So it is already in the pipeline. And we hit, I would say, all-time high number of loss of employment cases in the month of June. And slowly after the exercise of, by March and so on, the packages were distributed, and we slowly noticed a decline in the loss of employment numbers. So I would say a slight decline up to December. And again, due to the second wave and third wave of the COVID-19 virus, spreading of the COVID-19 virus, therefore, again, lockdowns were implemented on a time-to-time basis. With that, we saw again some increase in numbers of loss of employment cases. And we were, again, as the government has announced also that due to this situation that we are going through, in order to assist the employer, again, the packages were again extended. In fact, we have the wage subsidy being extended, that is to assist the employers so that they are able to sustain, meanwhile waiting for the recovery in terms of the economy, and hopefully by end of this year through the vaccination programs, and of course some booster to the employer to boost the hiring. So it is also a package that we have extended to the employers as to boost hiring. And with that, we are able to balance up so that we don't see so much of loss of employment cases, and at the same time to allow employers to restructure and be back to the operation of their business. So those are some basic scenarios that we are going through. But above all, I believe the world is facing the same thing actually. Not much different, as you have explained earlier. The most hit industry being badly affected by this pandemic is coming back to manufacturing, because Malaysia, one of the biggest industries is the manufacturing industry. And of course, the hotel and accommodation and F&B is also one industry which was impacted quite badly. And of course, the wholesale, though they are allowed wholesale and retail, but again, these are some sentiments that people carry. That is whether to be in the group where you are might possibly be affected, or you restrain from going out, and most probably utilize whatever that you have through the online method to do your daily buying and consumption. So those are scenarios that we are having currently. As I can only say, the pandemic has not it is impacting not only certain, but I would say all industries are impacted. In fact, up to the schools, your social activities and so on. So it is a different kind of situation compared to the financial crisis that we experienced formerly. So it is a thing which needs a different kind of method in handling the situation. So those are the scenarios that we have over in Malaysia.
All right. Thank you, Encik Jai. I mean, it's great to see that despite the unprecedented case of COVID-19, right? You see a very consistent impact across the different economies, as well as consistent policies being implemented, right, across different economies. The same employment retention program, wage subsidies, you hear it across the different panelists. All right, I think we touched a little bit on the broader scale of things, but one group that in particular that is more vulnerable than others is the self-employed or the informal employment group. We also see a rise in the number of gig riders in Malaysia. So protection for the informal economy, though vastly different across the different jurisdiction, is also a question, also a debate. You see that in California recently, where Proposition 22 was debated quite extensively. The industry, the digital platforms have a very different perspective of how we define gig workers in general. And I see this being applied differently across different jurisdictions, right? So maybe if we could get, again, Mr. Nao on the floor to just start the conversation rolling on how social protection has evolved to cover these individuals and how these individuals might be impacted more drastically during the pandemic. Over to you, Mr. Nao.
Thank you. Gig economy workers, I know it's an issue that social protection systems, again, internationally are struggling with. From an Irish perspective, pre-pandemic, we've actually seen, and we can't really explain why, a reduction in people that are false self-employment. To use another term, it's very unusual. It seems to go against most international trends, where we're seeing an increase in self-employment and subcontracting. What we have started before the pandemic is we've set up a special investigation team within the department here. And actually the biggest case we found is in some of the media outlets. And it's not quite the gig economy in terms of the platforms that you would have thought. It's more like freelance journalists that we would have thought our sole employment is from one employer and not one media outlet. So that's something we've looked at. We introduced a roadmap for social inclusion with several commitments about trying to strengthen this cohort and the protections for this cohort. So that includes a code of conduct that we're in the process of implementing to define the employment status of these workers. That inspection team I refer to specifically, and looking at the existing legislation we have and seeing can we strengthen it. We also have a special body called the Labour Market Advisory Council. It's chaired by a former DG of Labour in the OECD, John Martin, and it's made up of trade union, employer and academics, and they're looking at this particular issue. When it comes to the pandemic though, we were very conscious that this particular cohort of individuals, they're going to emerge. That we wouldn't have huge visibility within the previous systems pre-pandemic. And that's what happened. And what we did very quickly, we realized, and I referenced it earlier, we made our conditions in terms of access to those supports for people who had lost employment, whether they were available to the self-employed and people who were employees, that they just have one social insurance contribution, irrespective of whether it be an employee or a self-employed person. So what we didn't notice was there was no drift from the formal economy to the informal economy, probably because the nature of our usual restrictions and eligibility criteria were very much reduced in terms of our pandemic income supports. And that's essentially what's happened in an Irish case.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nao. Maybe let's then go to Mr. Niels. How's it like in Netherlands for the gig economy and the gig workers in the gig economy? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Well, now that's interesting that you also look at the media outlets, because just as well in Ireland, in the Netherlands, there's a lot of journalists who are self-employed or well, I didn't see them as gig workers, but you could if you wanted to. If we look at the Dutch case, then gig platforms like Uber, Deliveroo, Helpling, Gorillas, they are all active in the Netherlands. and they provide services for us such as food delivery, passenger transport, but also professional and domestic services such as cleaning your house through their platforms. In the gig economy, supply and demand, they are brought together more efficiently than in a traditional way with innovative technologies, of course. And we do see that there's a demand for their services, and they are considered to be part of our formal economy. However, some of these companies, especially the ones from the USA, they do not necessarily feel that Dutch law and regulation applies to them. Not all of these gig platforms, they work in a similar way. Some, they just employ their gig workers as if they are employees, and that's perfectly fine. But other platforms, they employ their gig workers as if they are self-employed. And there's a big difference in that in regulation in the Netherlands. So if you are an employee, you're automatically insured for sickness, disability, unemployment, and liability. But if you are self-employed, actually an employer or a gig platform, they are actually mitigating risks from the platform to the gig workers themselves. So these self-employed gig workers, they are by default, they are not insured for unemployment, they're not insured for sickness, for disability or liability in case of an accident. Actually, since COVID-19, we've seen a rise in the demand, especially for the delivery of food and groceries, which are important services that each platform offers. And there's also been some debate whether this was fair, that high-paid workers like myself, they were keeping themselves safe, staying at home, teleworking, social distancing. And these gig workers, they needed to get out of their house to do their job, and with that, putting their health at risk to provide these services to higher paid employees. At the moment, there are several lawsuits running from unions against gig platforms because unions feel that these people should be treated as employees. And it's yet to be seen what the final verdict will be on that. Left-wing parties and unions, they advocate that especially for these low-paid gig jobs, it's unethical to force people into self-employment, and these people should be treated and insured as employees. And it is expected then when we have a new government, we had elections a couple of months ago and there's no government in place yet. But when there will be a new government, it is expected that all gig workers will become employees, no matter what platform they are working for. But it's yet to be seen how it will work out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neil. I like that there are a lot of reforms ideas from both Ireland and Netherlands, actually. And I wish you all the best for the workers, right? I wish all the best for the workers in those regions. Moving to Malaysia, and Cik Jai, maybe you could describe what's the situation like for gig workers in Malaysia. I think similar in terms of rising demand, but social protection wise, what are we doing?
Yeah, Farkani and colleagues, when we talk about gig economy or gig workers, it is an interesting topic. It covers a wide range of kind of workers providing the service through platform engagement. Those are one area, but again, it comes under self-employed. Being a self-employment kind of work. And currently we have this law that we cover those working on their own, or shall we say self-employed. But as for the gig workers, one thing for sure, similar to what you guys is also facing, or you notice in your country, that we can see that the demand for gig workers is also the numbers are increasing, and we can see in Malaysia we have the food delivery. In fact, we did the food delivery. There are a few brand which they carry, for example, like Grab Food, Panda Food, and so on. And we also noticed like those delivering products or orders such as from online orders where they utilize these gig workers kind of workers to deliver the orders. So we can see an increase also in this kind of area. And with that being the case, so one thing for sure that we were instructed by our government that to provide protection to those in this working kind of workers. And we have this program called as known as SPS Lindung. SPS Lindung means a direct translation to you all. That is to protect these workers that from any kind of accidents and so on. So they are protected. So again, we have another one more. We were thinking like for the time being, most probably under the consideration of those who are allowed to move in terms of delivery and so on, most probably to encourage people to take up this kind of jobs. It is flexible. You manage your time, and at the same time, not forgetting that there's a need for protection to these workers. So therefore, we had introduced this program known as Kerjaya Gig or Gig Carrier Gig, so that those undergo or to undertake this kind of work, they are given some kind of benefits so that to appreciate more to enter. But at the same time, my office, we are also looking into how to protect these workers, especially in terms of when they face loss of income. They might be because the employer or the platform might also might not be working one day, so there might be a possibility that they will face loss of income, the loss in generating any income. So therefore, we are also working towards to find a solution to it. So we are in the midst of reviewing our law to include more or to strengthening the law to protect the workers from in case of if there's a cases of loss of income. So input from Netherlands is very much welcome. We have looked into your website to understand further the laws that from your country, and therefore again with this engagement I take note of your views, your points which you have shared, and of course as I say, to protect is one thing, but at the same time to encourage so that for temporary measures, most probably gig kind of employment would be helpful for those who are in need of employment. So that's what something that we are experiencing in Malaysia.
All right, thank you, Encik Jai. Now it's interesting that you mentioned the fact that self-employment, right? You might not actually lose your job, or you can actually work at any time. The nature of the work is based on tasks, right? So technically, being unemployed is almost very unlikely, unless you are in a situation where the economy entirely shuts down, then that will be the case. But if as a delivery rider, I can just work at any time at any platform, since they are always accepting employment, which is interesting. Depending on what kind of social protection systems you have, protecting them by definition is quite difficult. All right, I think. Oh, yeah.
If I may add one thing, Because yes, we have seen that as well, that you can work at any time that you like. But we've also seen that these platforms will definitely push you as a self-employed gig worker into certain time slots that work best for these platforms. And they have several ways with financial incentives, but also gamification strategies to push people into working when it's best for the platform. So yes, there is some flexibility, but the platform will definitely push you towards certain time slots when there's a high demand for work.
I think that's a point of debate as well, right? The ability to control as a master-servant relationship versus someone who is self-employed. And now with digital technology, the lines between self-employment and regular formal employment is becoming very blurred, right? And the different levels of control, right? You're talking about the ability to earn an income, the ability to sort of own your assets, the ability to work at any time. Those levels of control has to be differently classified in order for us to then ascertain the relationship. And that's a challenge that I think a lot of us are facing actually. Obviously in Malaysia, like Encik Jai said, that we've established the Self-Employment Act to just cover them under the Self-Employment Act.
Yeah, those will be the points for us to really understand when we engage with the platform owners, whether the form of control, what kind of form of control, what is the degree of control? Will the gig workers be able to say no during peak hours when demand is high? Those are things which will keep in our mind when we engage.
Interesting,
like,
very interesting.
Right? The algorithms for all of these platforms might not actually be transparent. So for us to then decide which platform is actually assessing their control and which platform is not is quite difficult as well, unless we engage the platforms directly. And regulations have to keep up then, right? And in understanding all this technology and interpreting this technology into legislation, which is okay, I feel I'm digressing already. But yes, all part of the topic. Maybe we can go back to formal and informal sector. One of the things that I was told to ask is about active labor market programs. I think Encik Jai had already mentioned some of the active labor market programs that we did for informal employment, specifically the Kerjaya gig, right? But for Mr. Neil and Mr. Niall, what are sort of the active labor market programs introduced in your respective economies? I understand that you guys already mentioned wage subsidies and helping with the transition, but maybe in deeper detail, what kind of active labor market programs were introduced during the pandemic and to sort of cushion the impact of the pandemic for both gig workers as well as formal employment? So Mr. Niall, over to you.
Thank you. Obviously, as you said, so we have the income supports, the wage subsidy schemes. There are, I suppose, flagship or the most expensive, unfortunately. And given the numbers I gave you, you can have a sense of the expensive cost, and we'll probably be paying for them for quite a while, I'd imagine. We have introduced an economic recovery plan last year. So the government, just to complicate matters, when the pandemic hit, we didn't have a government. We had an election in February of 2020. There was a long period, so we had a caretaker government. New government came in, and their first input was what we call the July job stimulus package. And they introduced several stimulus, particularly over that summer period of last year, to try and promote hospitality, domestic tourism. There was measures introduced to get your tax back on hospitality expenditure from the revenue commissioners. That was introduced. We then found, obviously, They introduced a new economic recovery plan, and we've introduced a national employment strategy at the start of July of this year. In that, it contains key measures about identifying those that we deem to be most at risk of turning essentially their jobs not being available to them. We believe there's about 80,000 people who have been in receipt of our pandemic unemployment payment continuously since its introduction. That number was nearly 200,000. It's now down to 80,000. And that's our priority focus from an active labour market perspective. We've commenced from May actually contacting all those people through our public employment service and engaging with them, identifying those that do not believe that their employment will be coming back, and specifically offering supports available to them. We've also introduced a new, we had previously in Ireland had an internship program targeted at young people. That when we recovered from the financial crisis, we closed that program down. We've now reintroduced a similar program, but learning from the lessons of the first program, a work experience program, and we're targeting that program at that cohort of people who are in receipt of these payments for long-term unemployment. The other aspect that we've focused on looking at our analysis is that young people, probably similar to all other countries, have been particularly hardest hit. We find that the youth unemployment level has actually doubled in comparison with the general population of the over 25s. I'm just specifically talking the under 25s here and not the under 30s, the under 25s. And we also find that they're twice as likely as a cohort to be in receipt of a pandemic unemployment payment. So our measures are focusing, our academic year essentially restarts next week. And from middle of September, those individuals who have not gone back to college will be prioritized for support through the Public Employment Service. And we have the normal offering, essentially it's development of an individual tailored plan for their progression to employment and identifying education and training needs, in addition to the work experience program, the new experience that's at a snapshot, essentially the measures. It's still early days. So maybe if you ask me at the end of the year how we get on at reducing that number of 80,000, that's our priority focus for the moment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nal, for that elaborative explanation on the different programs in Ireland. Let's go back to Netherlands. Mr. Neil, what are sort of the active labor market programs you're implementing in your economy to sort of
thank you.
So quickly?
I'll do that. First, similar as the Ireland case, we've seen that younger workers were the first ones to lose their jobs. So that's really similar. But in the Netherlands, they are also often the first ones to find a new job. So it's easier for them than for older workers who lose their jobs. We've had a couple of crisis measures. The main one is NOW, which came in place of short-time work. Short-time work, we had that in place before, but it was just too complicated to execute short-time work for tens of thousands of employers. And NOW is much simpler by design, and it's basically a job retention scheme that reimburses employers for a percentage of total wage costs. And that depends, the height of the subsidy, it depends on the loss of turnover. Then for a very short period of time, we had the TOFA, which is a temporary arrangement for temp workers who were not eligible to normal unemployment benefits. So there was a short benefit period for them. And we had TOSO, and TOSO, it's a form of welfare, especially for self-employed who lost their income but were not insured for unemployment benefits. And now we are trying to work with people who become unemployed and make a transition to a new sector or new employment with our regional transition teams. The main objective for NLW is to keep people in employment with their employers. And for other measures, it was mostly to prevent poverty. If we look at our economy and you saw our unemployment rates, we see that a relatively low number of people have lost their jobs. Insolvencies of companies are at a record low number since, I can't remember. And the economy is doing quite well. And therefore, we conclude that these measures have been quite effective in cushioning the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. So I'm interested to learn how this works in Malaysia.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Niels. Again, I'm very happy to hear some good news from Netherlands. Back to Encik Jai. I know we have extensive lists of programs. Maybe you could highlight some, especially to address things like longer duration of unemployment, things like missing years of school, right? Like with now the incoming graduates coming in with probably 1 year or 2 year less education, or affected education, to say to be precise. How are we dealing with this situation?
Yeah, dealing with these are the groups, as Farkani has mentioned. We have the those who in need of immediate assistance, like those who have lost their job, which they are under our maybe within the scheme where they are claiming for the benefits under the employment insurance scheme. So we have those groups which we have to address immediately, and we have those who are outside where they are in search of new employment, for example, new job. We also have an area that we need to cater, that is those graduates about to graduate. So these are packages that which have been disbursed or being implemented to cater for all those related groups. So to start with, we started out with this program called Employment Retention Program. It is to assist those where the employer has put these workers under unpaid leave. So there's a small portion of benefit to be paid to the workers through the employer. So this is to help out so that during the unpaid leave situation, the workers are given a small portion or a portion of the benefit which they are able to use for sustain their family and their daily expenses. Besides other kinds of cash handout given by the government. And next, we introduced the wage subsidy. So we had the wage subsidy 1.0 and the latest up to wage subsidy 4.0. So the wage subsidy with the intention, as you have mentioned earlier, also both colleagues, that is to stop or to sort of like to assure that the massive retrenchment do not take place by assisting the employers to retain their workers. So we roll out this program, and we are able to, I would say that we are successful in helping out almost around 2.7 million workers. And with that, we are still continuing up to wage subsidy 4.0. And it is still ongoing, subject to the current strategy, that is the recovery strategy. So this within these 4 months, it is crucial. If assuming the program to provide vaccination goes on as planned, so most probably the industry are able to be in full swing kind of operation, which will mean that they are able to come back to their norm, or to start their operation as normal. So most probably, I won't be able to say now, but most probably government will need to review the wage subsidy. But at the same time, we have also introduced a hiring incentive. This is to help out. We have employers who are strong. They are able to hire people and to boost the hiring. we have roll out the hiring incentive programs, that is to target those graduates, school leavers. They might be able to participate under the apprenticeship kind of program. We have another one more incentives within the hiring incentive. This is to encourage the employers to hire those below 40 years old, so that they are given the opportunity to be employed. And also those above 40 and vulnerable groups. So above 40 might be those group they are considered quite difficult to be employed or to get new employment. So in order to encourage hiring, an incentive to be given so that employer will hire them. Above all, there's also a training programs given whereby any employers who hire these workers, they are also able to participate or to allow their workers to undergo training, that is to reskill or upskill with the being subsidized by this package. And at the same time also we utilize the digital platform, our job portal. We have launched our job portal this year also. This is to cater, last year, My Future Jobs, so that we are able to use the technology in terms of recruiting, to assist in the registering of job seekers, matching and placement exercise. And I think throughout from last year until this year, with the ongoing lockdowns, from time to time, so we have also managed to help our employers to conduct interview sessions through online basis. So there's no need to meet face to face. We have utilized the technology in terms of undergoing the interview sessions. So in fact, carnivals, grouping up of employers to conduct interviews, it is done through online. So it is something that we are a change to the norms by having face to face. We are testing out whether how far that through online we are able to also perform this exercise. So again, these are all an experience. As I say, we never thought that we are able to go through this, but we have gone through this. Actually, we have done it, and we have seen the result. As far as the record shows, we are able to maintain the unemployment or the loss of employment cases, and we didn't see any spike, or as per estimated by certain groups that Malaysia will reach loss of employment with a huge number. So we are able to suppress this through these packages. The exercise works, and it is successful. Those are the experience from Malaysia.
Great. Thank you, Encik Jai. I think you covered quite an extensive list of programs covering from retention to recovery, and then subsequently digital technology use throughout the pandemic. Unfortunately, guys, I think I was informed that I'm running out of time. So before I end, maybe I'll just go around the table again to just ask everyone for their last minute views of the situation, and maybe any advice to policymakers to strengthen sort of the social protection system in general, in order to provide better coverage for workers. Maybe we'll start with Mr. Nile, and then we'll go again around the table.
There's an opportunity here for us all. Social welfare, social protection has been at the coalface of protecting all our citizens against the global pandemic, right? Without the measures we've all introduced, people would have been forced to go to work, and the health consequences of that would have been far bigger and actually unthinkable. There's an opportunity. Pre-pandemic, we would have struggled to convince many people that we need to strengthen certain aspects of our social welfare. So we have to grab this opportunity to the point you've made about expanding coverage. In an Irish context, that means essentially, that gig economy. It's grappling what Neil said in terms of turning people, irrespective of their employment status, into de facto employees. That is such an important aspect I think we all need to take. We also, in an Ireland context, our unemployment systems, they've been proven, they need to be adapted. They're means tested and the social insurance. But I think really what's happened on foot of the pandemic, we need to go back to what we had in the early 1990s, a pay-related benefit scheme that many jurisdictions. If we had that, we wouldn't have had to introduce our new pandemic unemployment payment. Also, that pay-related benefit needs to cushion the first couple of months of unemployment, similar to the flexicurity model that many European countries have, and it does work. That's something we're looking at. The transitioning from the supports we have is going to be difficult from us all, and weaning, particularly the wage subsidy schemes, is going to be very hard, and not having the consequence of having more people becoming unemployed. But we do need a roadmap, and we do need to be very clear to employers that these supports do need to end. We've started that process, and obviously there's quite a bit of pushback politically and from employers on it, but we have started the process as the economy. But it has to be clear that these supports are unprecedented supports, and they are temporary. And the final thing I'll say from an Irish perspective, and it's already been alluded to, and I know it's the situation in EWB as well, is there's no going back from a digital perspective. This was an evolutionary leap forward in Ireland anyway, in terms of digital services, and the amount of applications and processing that we were able to do and process and support people was only possible because we had the digital infrastructure to support that, and similar to what Umar had said as well. It is about maintaining that momentum and continuing to build. And from an Irish context, that means we've almost 90 schemes. We have to get the rest of them online. We've about 20 of them or so. It's about the balance. So that's the key lessons from myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nal, for those key lessons. I'm sure all of us would learn from the Irish perspective. Mr. Neil, over to you for your last comments on social protection in general and how to strengthen it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, yes, I can for sure relate to the Irish case. It will be quite difficult to stop wage subsidy schemes, but for now, we feel that investing, well, it was billions, only NLW, only it was already 18 billion euros. So that's a huge number for the Dutch economy, but it has helped saving jobs, and we as UWV, we've been very effective in implementing emergency measures, and because of that, our image has improved significantly. People are a lot more positive about UWV and the work we do. Satisfaction rates of employers and also unemployed job seekers, they are higher than ever, which is something we are really proud of. But at the same time, all these emergency measures, they seem to prevent structural change. And before the COVID crisis, we had a lack of skilled workers, and we still do. So we feel that there's still a need to re and upskill and make transitions in the workforce. And as long as we are on emergency measures, we do not feel that will happen, and we hope that it will happen in the future. And to finish it off, I would just to wish everybody good health, and please stay negative and be safe.
Thank you, Mr. Neil. I like that. Stay negative. Now, Encik Jai, maybe a few words from you to end the session. You're muted, Encik Jai.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, colleagues. And of course, I have to repeat that for Malaysia, or the employment insurance system under which it is being under Perkeso or SOPSO, we are new. We have, again, as I say, our I would say it is like a blessing to us, because we are undergoing this situation to test out the ALMP, active labor market program. We were not given the chance to learn and implement. It is coming at the right timing where you have to come up with ideas and implement. And I thank the support from everyone, the government, from my office, from my head office, that we were given this opportunity to promote and propose. Therefore, the ALMP has been rolled out, and we can see that it is being implemented, and we can sort of like say that it is successful. And therefore, I would say that strengthening the we need to learn more about other kind of programs that are being implemented by, like for example in Irish and Netherlands. Definitely the programs will be something that helpful for Malaysia. And I would also say that there's always room for improvement. That's how that we are conducting a review towards our law. The law should be flexible enough to address situation according to the situation. And situation as such like this, we won't be able to say when we are coming to an end to the pandemic. We are not sure. It is very uncertain, but measures and effort to be taken should be able to address the situation. Therefore, I would say that the law that we have should be flexible enough to address the situation. And of course, technology plays an important role, as what we are doing now. We are able to meet up, without having to travel. So it is a big change. You don't have to have a meeting whereby you need to travel. You can do it by doing it in your office itself. So it is something that new thing that we have to take up and enhance and learn further. So with that, I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Njajai. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone. I think in light of the pandemic, social protection, like you all have said, has given the spotlight to become sort of heroes of today. And I like the attention that is given to social protection. Hopefully, though, all our programs are guided by some also, like Mr. Neil, reform strategy to not just cushion the impact, but also to improve the labor market to a next level. With that, I think I hope the viewers learned a couple of things today, and maybe we'll see you guys soon. Thank you. All right, I'm just going to pause there and just say thank you, everyone, for joining in and I guess contributing your ideas and your perspective on things. I apologize on behalf of the organizers that there were a couple of technical difficulties throughout the session. And also I thank you guys for also giving that moment of silence during the Azan prayer. That was very, very, very polite of you guys. Before I say goodbye, do you guys want to say anything, or are you guys good? Do you guys have any questions for the organizers?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I learned a lot, so very much appreciated. Like Neil said earlier, wish you all the best with the event, and good luck. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Neil, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, well, thank you from my side. And yes, it's really convenient to do this from my home office. However, I would have liked to eat some nasi and rendang or laksa, which is much better in Malaysia than at home. And thank you for having us. You were a great host, Pakani. Jai, the Malaysian case was really interesting to learn from, and all the best for your congress as all the other speakers. And I feel it will be a very interesting congress. So good luck with that.
Yeah.
And
thank you,
Neil and Niles. Thank you to your inputs you have shared. And again, I would like to welcome you to Malaysia. If you're in Malaysia, I'm happy to host nasi lemak, laksa, and so on.
That's
So-
great to hear.
Hope to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hope to see you guys soon. And yeah, like Neil said, stay negative, guys. Stay negative.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.